You're listening to the Missionary Perspective Podcast with veteran missionaries Eric Johnson and Joshua Mead. We're glad you could join us. We trust this podcast will be both a blessing and a challenge as we relate topics in world evangelism from a missionary perspective. Now, here's Josh and Eric.
Welcome to the Missionary Perspective Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Johnson. I'm joined once again, by my good friend Josh Mead, who's in Senegal, West Africa. And boy, Josh, it's been a little bit since we spoke, and since then, we've had some neat things going on in the podcast, and we want to have basically today to kind of be a follow-up podcast or a reaction podcast to a really amazing interview you were able to have with Josh Sullivan, the missionary who had gone through such an amazing ordeal that many people are aware of, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And also a little follow-up on one of the neat interviews I got to do with a young man named Rusty Gibson. And but boy, Josh, I know you're getting ready for a big trip to another country soon. I know you're staying busy. But Josh, how did this amazing opportunity? I noticed after watching your interview with Josh Sullivan, I went back and kind of did a real quick YouTube search. And other than his local news outlets, I only found one other place where Josh has decided to share his story. I know there's an element to the story we're going to talk about, just a little bit of inside baseball, how that recording came about, and how even there God was doing some neat things. But Josh, how did this come about in a brief way?
Yeah, Josh, I reached out to Josh shortly after the incident. I waited maybe a month or two and just reached out and said, hey, obviously there's no pressure, but whenever you're comfortable and if you're interested in sharing your story, I believe your story would be a blessing to our audience. And just reach out and said, hey, if you'd like to, I'd love to interview you. And he obviously has been bombarded with requests for interview. And, once you hear the story, and if you haven't heard it yet, go back and listen. Once you hear the story, you realize, okay.
Don't listen to us. Go back and listen to it first.
Right. But you realize how much he went through and just the trauma of that experience. And so I figured, okay, well, I'm not going to, it might be a while, but I just wanted to put it out there. And he reached out, not that long ago. And he said, I'm starting to reach out to different people asking, he still gets requests to do to do interviews and even some podcasts. And so he reached out and he said, I was recommended by other missionaries who listened to your podcast that this would be a good one. And really before we recorded it, we were talking about kind of our goal with this podcast when we started it was to have the missionary in mind, whether you're starting your journey as a missionary. And I'm excited with this series. I think we're going to develop this more if we can, that you began with Rusty Gibson, right? Gibson. And just kind of following along with young men and couples that are beginning their missionary journey and following through and kind of watching that process. And so I told him, he understood before he even came on the podcast that that's kind of the demographic focus is to be a blessing to missionaries, to help share ideas, to share experience. Now, of course, the audience is a little broader than that, and we're grateful to everyone who listens and tunes in to our podcast. We're grateful to everybody who sends in questions that and topics that we can address. And so Josh understood when we began the interview. I said, now, for this interview, I want you to think of the missionary who's on the field. That's who you're speaking to right now, not just telling your story, but you're going to share your experience in a way that those who are listening that are missionaries are going to relate to you even more so than those who hear your story but have never been to the mission field and done mission work. And so with that in mind, I really wanted to tap into not just his story. The story is incredible, but I really wanted to tap into Josh's mind and his heart. And so we spent the first 30 minutes just talking about his call, how God led him and burdened him for this particular ministry in South Africa. And it was such a blessing to see his heart for that specific region, to go into a country where there are missionaries. And I appreciated that, number one, he wasn't critical of the existing work. A lot of young guys come in and they think they've got some new ideas or there's things that have been neglected and I'm going to come in and do what other missionaries never did. No, I think he recognized and was appreciative of what other missionaries have done and were doing, but he recognized that there was a need and an open door to serve in one of these more difficult communities where very few missionaries had gone. And I love that spirit in a man when he says, God's called me and he's called me to this place and he's called me to go where it's hard. He's called me to go where it's difficult and to not just go and move in next door to a missionary and kind of be in that bubble of the missionary community. And that, again, I'm not being critical. I'm just saying it's encouraging to see young men coming up and saying, and young, he's probably a little bit younger than I am, but maybe close to the same age. Anyways, but to come in and say, I want to go where it's difficult. And that was his heart. And he learned the language right away and speaks it fluently, and then began engaging in that community, recognizing and knowing the danger and yet trusting the Lord every step of the way. And I think that was initially, that's what I wanted to tap into. And Josh did such a fantastic job of sharing his heart and then walking us through his story.
Yeah, I made jotted down a few notes of just things that I think I've watched it twice now. And I think the first thing that came is because you took time to go over kind of the background of who he is and how he got there and what his calling was. It really helped understand because South Africa is a very complicated politically and racially place, especially with just years of complications. So laying that groundwork and having his background, but really just, I think there's a bunch of thoughts here, but the first thing that kind of just comes through even to the very end is just how raw and real it was. He didn't hold anything back. He did in the sense of he wasn't trying to be, too specific on things so that, for any kind of glory or anything like that. But it was just, you could just see it, hear it, how raw and real it was to him. And, his testimony is one that we all can relate to in the sense of, he could have been any one of our buddies who just happened to be there on a midweek service and all this happened. And even just his, it's funny, if you talk to enough veteran missionaries ahead of time, you sometimes even have an expectation you're going to go through, getting robbed or, having something happen to you. So like there's almost even a preparation. And we went through something much smaller than this, but when they were in language school and they broke into our home and tied up Holly and stole our stuff. Yeah. Even though it was very dramatic and nothing compared to Josh Sullivan, there was this element of, this is kind of what you read about and hear about, and God gave us grace. But to hear his story and how it relates to an amazing story, almost, like we would have heard a story about a friend just being robbed at, around the corner was so amazing. And then just to see I think he was raw and real with his emotions as well. And then for me, listening to him talk about how he handled it day by day, you all talked about that in great detail about how some days, like I think there was the one phrase about, and you reiterated it about, I'm not going to say exactly right, but the basic was, I'm not a God that's got to keep, proving to you my promises. If I made this promise, I'm going to fulfill it. And how that gave him peace in certain times. And I can also just speak, just someone who's dealt with a tiny bit of anxiety issues. He talked a little bit about that and how he would work through basically 24 hours a day trying to calm his heart rate. And I thought, wow, what an amazing, dependence on God every minute. And he knows it was a miracle. It was really amazing. And I think the other thing that was most raw and real to me really was kind of after this miraculous thing happens where the police officers show up and they're chasing the people and he gets saved and he gets, he gets freed and they're going through it and people are all very excited. And, this emotional down that he and his wife were trying to experience and trying to explain that was just really amazing how you're supposed to be happy, but like your body has not reacted to that yet. And I think in many ways he's still going through that. And to me, the ultimate sign of his close walk with the Lord is that his willingness to go back. I think he knows, and even as he said it, like he knows it's not going to be the same. I think he knows there are going to be all kinds of situations that come up mentally, physically, spiritually, that will be challenges due to this past event. And yet his dedication to the Lord is pretty amazing to see how he's willing to do that. And we pray for them. We understand that, there's this amazing wilderness that he has, and we'll just see how God comes to pass, and if it'll be in what place, and how he does it. But it was very inspiring, and more, on the breadth of the whole story, how he handled it, but how he handled it before and after, to me, was probably the most incredible.
I want to come back to that, that statement that Josh made, because that stood out to me the most. And leading up to that, I did the interview the week before the one that we actually recorded, and it was fantastic. I finished, and I'm thinking, as we're going through the interview, I'm thinking Josh is doing such a tremendous job. Just one of the best interviews. I've got to sit down and just really enjoy hearing his story, just powerful. And then when it finished, I was using another platform, and apparently the browser that Josh was using on his end, it wasn't compatible with the platform I was using to record the podcast. And I assumed it was being automatically recorded on both ends, on my end and on his end. So I finished and I clicked on, finalize everything. And when it popped up on the platform, it was just me. It was just me sitting there, saying,
goodness.
"Hey, this is Josh Mead, and I'm here with Josh. Just say hi, Josh." And it's just silence.
Nothing.
And I tell you, my heart just sank, and I thought, I was embarrassed. I had to write, call him and say, "Hey, I have nothing." And I asked him if he had anything. I contacted customer support, and it fell apart. So we had, telling that story takes a lot out of you emotionally. You're reliving that trauma. And so he requested we wait, can we do it the following week? Absolutely. So we rescheduled, and every day I prayed, Lord, make it even better. I don't know how he can top it, because it was such a great interview. And the original interview was an hour long, 50 minutes long. I think this one went for an hour and 20 minutes, and there were details he included. There were the end when he gave it was really a exhortation to continue serving the Lord, despite, and how, facing trauma, trusting God and all that. That whole final exhortation, he wasn't in the first one, just the Spirit really moved through Josh and used that. And if anybody, it was a huge blessing to me. But going back to, that was something he made that statement in the second interview, where it really stood out to me, because he said that first day God gave him peace, that this was going to turn out well, and that he'll see his family again. So he said, okay, I'm going to trust the Lord for that. But he said that peace, it left, it wasn't there. And it's not that he said, and I appreciate he said it wasn't that God took it from him. It's just he wasn't holding on to it. And by the fifth or sixth day, he said it wasn't as much a reassurance as, and the way he worded it, I've never heard it worded that way. And he said it was as if the Lord told me that I'm not the type of God who tells you I'm going to do something, and then I have to keep reassuring you that I'm going to do it. Basically, if I tell you I'm going to do something, that's it. I'm doing it. And I'm not going to keep coming. And I'm not going to keep coming and holding your hand and reminding you. I'm going to do it. And it was such a powerful statement to me, to think that's really that's our God. He said, I'll do it. And if he declares something in your spirit and it, God will accomplish what he tells us he will do. And I think that what I took away from that was that the peace of God doesn't come from an emotional high of like, oh, I feel good that it's going to turn out good. I got a good feeling about it. The peace of God is founded upon, established by God's word. And so I think what I really appreciated about that was, no matter how we're feeling, God will come through and do what he says he's going to do. And so we can hold on to that and not be, led astray by the waves of our emotions. And of course, we hope to never experience the trauma that Josh went through. But I really appreciated how Josh pointed to the fact that, all of us have different difficulties that we face. And when you're on the mission field, if you're a missionary, you have probably faced some sort of trauma. You know, what happened to you guys in when you were taking language school there? That was traumatic, a traumatic experience that you had to work through and
Mhm.
overcome. And so, yeah, it was just such a great, just such an insightful principle that he had gleaned from that, beside many other things that he had gleaned. But the story of God delivering him, I mean, it's a modern day, epic. It's an incredible story. And I hope a lot of people will tune in and hear the story. It was incredible.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember when it happened, we were actually, I think we were getting ready to go. Yeah, in fact, I think when it happened, we'd heard about it because I think it happened like on a Thursday or something, and we
Mhm.
had heard about it, and we have church on midweek services on Thursday. We prayed for him in our prayer circles with the men. I remember specifically doing that, and then Sunday before church service, we did the same. And then that Sunday, we headed off to camp with the teenagers. And so we were with the teenagers at it was the week of, they call it the Holy Week, the week of leading up to Easter. And I remember, I don't remember what morning it was that when they found him and got him and he was free. I remember having devotions in the morning and checking after devotions on Twitter feed or Facebook. It must have been Facebook. And people were talking about the story. And I was very excited. And I remember reading some of the accounts from the police. And, you know, I always tell my kids, like, whenever you hear something new, fresh, like always wait 6 months or a year, you'll get
Right,
all the
right.
real facts. And so when he started telling the real story, it's not exactly the same that I remember reading, but I'm always the kind of guy who likes the documentary better than the movie, anyways. And so hearing his version of it, the real version of it, was even more powerful, I thought, in many ways. The idea about him, or the story about him falling down and hurting his leg, and how God used that. And I would not be surprised one day if Lord wills, there will be some sort of dramatization of this, and they still won't be
Yeah,
able to do it properly.
right.
You're not going to be able to put in all the the real factors of trust and God's sovereignty. And yet at the same time, one of the things I came up with was needing to pray for him even more now. I'm thankful to the Lord that I've been blessed to come across this series of just missionaries and actually just leaders of the faith in the last, I don't know, 400 or 500 years, and pretty much synonymous with every great leader in the faith in one way or another had to go through very difficult times, oftentimes through the majority of the rest of their lives. At the they 20, 30, 40 years old, develop some kind of chronic problem or deal with a loss of a loved one or something. And to me, what's amazing is how people can push through the difficulties and push through trauma. You think about William Carey and think about Hudson Taylor and just a lot of the loss they suffered, and yet willing to just still trust the Lord and go forward. I think that's kind of what was like a modern day version of that, and praying for him and whatever the next steps the Lord has for him. That he. It's not that he's going to have to deal with this every day, but there's to be a part of him that it will have always be forever change, and yet at the same way God forms us more into the image of his son. And so it was a really powerful testimony, and one that I hope people will listen to and you share with other people, and is one that there's a dramatic part of it where it happens and how he gets freed, but if you listen to the totality of it, I think there's even more a rich story there.
Yeah, absolutely. And even not just for himself, but for his family.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's things you're not going to be able to even pick up on that are under the surface of reaction and feelings, even for his kids. I'm reading through a book by Matt Jones. We interviewed him a while back ago. I want to
Mm.
bring him back on because he finally finished
No,
and
yeah.
published a book on missionary kids. And
Yeah.
it's just a great book. I'm working through it again. I did a cursory reading. Now I'm kind of going through it again, but I just read the other night, he's retelling a story of a traumatic event that to him, he just kind of brushed it off. Matt, who is a missionary in Thailand, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
He
Thailand,
was
yeah.
he was retelling how one of his neighbors behind their house was kind of a belligerent drunk, and he got into a
Mm,
domestic dispute with this guy's, not Matt's wife, but this guy's own wife. And he said they're
mm,
yelling and they're fighting, and so he gets on his little scooter or something. He goes over to the house and he confronts the guy because he said in the book, he says I had been I had seen a case of domestic abuse before and I didn't do anything about it. And he said I
mm,
vowed
mm,
if I can intervene, I'm going to intervene, and he did. Well, this lady ended up breaking something, and so he blamed it on Matt. So the guy comes over to Matt's house. He's drunk and belligerent and yelling, and Matt goes out. Well, he said my daughter was watching from her window this whole time, and he thought, finally police came, everything was resolved. But he said years later, when he was talking to his daughter about, just different events and trauma and things, she said, I never, she had never shared this, but she said I never felt safe in our home because I thought anytime
mm,
this guy could come over and try to hurt us. And so it was something his daughter never expressed, and he was completely unaware of that. And so I know just right before we did Josh's interview, we had talked about stress on the mission field. And I really, I've really been burdened about that lately. And I want to, I want to bring Matt on and do some follow up and talking about his experience with missionary kids and how you can
mm.
address that
Well,
and really
let me
focus in
add
on that.
this in. You
Yeah.
don't even probably know about this. Matt is in charge of a monthly missionary call that originates from Thailand,
Okay.
and my kids are on it every month, and
Oh,
they
great.
love it. They do Bible studies, but then they do a lot of games, and they have like 30 or 40 different missionary kids from all over the world, and he's done a great job at this. In fact, we're going to be on the west coast of America when they have the next one, and the kids have already calculated it's going to be like 5 in the morning, and they have to wake up at
Oh,
5 in the
wow.
morning.
Yeah.
So yeah, Matt's been doing a great job of really connecting with that missionary kid and understanding that, and so we definitely need to have him on again.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really neat. So yeah, just the overall interview again. If you haven't listened to it yet, you need to go back and listen to the interview. And I sat down with my family and we watched it on a Sunday afternoon. We don't have Sunday night services here, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's what we did one Sunday evening. And just
That's
yeah,
great.
it's such a powerful testimony to the grace of God. But like you said, keep Josh in your prayers as he's seeking
Yeah.
specific guidance, and that God will give him wisdom and discernment as he is leading his family. One that he can recognize in himself areas where there's PTSD, and these are
Mm-hmm.
legit issues that the Lord will help you, but you need to seek the proper help. And I'm so grateful he's got good men around him, men and women that have been counseling them and guiding him. And I know he's going to do
Yeah.
the right thing. But I really wanted toward the end to really reiterate, if you're a missionary listening to this, you've probably experienced some sort of trauma. Just living on the mission field is trauma. Okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
you've left your
Mm-hmm.
culture, and especially if you've had to learn another language, that there's all kinds of different traumas that break you down over time. And you need to seek, if it's becoming a burden beyond what you can bear in your walk with the Lord alone. We're not meant to bear these things by ourselves, right? I love where
Mm-hmm.
Paul writes and says, every man is to bear his own burden, but bear ye one another burden, and so fulfill the love of
Mm-hmm.
Christ. And so God has intended that we bear burdens in order to help ease the burdens of others. And in doing so, others can ease our burdens, and we become a community that can reinforce one another in these traumatic experiences that we all face at whatever level it might be. And so God saw fit to allow Josh to go through this traumatic experience and delivered him. And I loved, Eric, how he even was talking about just there's layers beyond what he could even fully understand, that the Lord used this to even bring the president of South Africa and President Trump back to the table. Because I saw earlier in the year how Trump brought him in and kind of, ambushed him there with that video. It was a disaster. Trump was just being Trump. And it was kind of an embarrassment for the South African president. But this kind of brought them back to speaking terms, which is a good thing. It's good to have that sort of. So it just the layers of how God could use this is just it is just wild. But I grew up making movies. I have a passion for storytelling, and as he's telling this, I thought, man,
I know.
I'd get my camera gear together now and go film this thing.
Yeah,
I hope somebody can film it and really. I think it should be. I think we need modern, stories retold, and
100%.
kids aren't reading books that much these days. Put it into film,
No.
and I'd love to see that put to film if Josh would be comfortable with that, and really tap
Yeah.
into that the spiritual warfare that was taking place during that time. And in my mind, I visualize stories as they're being told. So I mean, I can see the ending as it culminates and the guys are pulling in, and just that silence before the gunfight started, and just Josh having no clue. Okay, who's won?
No.
What's going to happen next? Just an incredible story.
Yeah. And one thing I really admire as we finish this part of the pod up, I don't know Josh personally, but I do know some people who have been close to him and they've been able to help him. And, I saw a situation years ago with somebody who had gone through a very traumatic event. And the best I can tell, that person didn't handle very wisely and suffered a lot of consequences because of that.
Mhm.
And really to this day still hasn't really gone over that because I don't think they handled the situation properly, trying to get the right help you're mentioning, having the burdens be borne. In fact, in some ways, maybe even exploited their trauma
Mhm.
to what they thought was to their gain, which ended up being a great loss in their
Right.
life.
Yeah.
But to see how Josh has handled it completely the opposite.
Right.
And I know a few stories from just third person accounts of how well they've tried to do things the right way. You
Mhm.
can tell there's no, trying to exploit a story on any level,
Yeah.
and really just trying to tell the parts that would encourage other missionaries to keep going. And that was really encouraging me to see,
Yeah.
just the maturity there, and not glorying in it in any way, but really also not being afraid to share the
Right.
goodness of God and His miraculous story. So I've seen an amazing balance there that I'm very, very impressed with.
I agree. Absolutely agree. I feel he's handling this in a right way, and he will find that healing, and it's a process that
Hmm.
takes time. But yeah, I think you said it well. It's a fine line between exploiting and sharing and being vulnerable and being transparent and all that. And I really,
Yeah.
again, Josh, if you're listening, I really appreciate that you took the
Yep.
time to come on the podcast and
Very,
share your
very
story.
much.
And I know already it's been a blessing to
Yep.
many who tuned in and listened. So now I'm excited about
Absolutely.
this series that you kind of started at. You came up with the idea of,
Hmm.
hey, let's interview a guy who's about to go onto the field. And I like the aspect of let's interview him and see where he's at, and then have him
Hmm.
ask you a couple questions. And then
Yeah.
I'm excited to see a follow up. Now, by the time this airs, the next
Hmm.
Rusty's story, his part two will already be out. I edited
Hmm.
that the other day and really enjoyed just, pertinent questions. And so I'm excited to see how we can develop this into further. So I love that idea of, let's see somebody at the beginning of their journey and then follow up down the road as they're continuing on in their journey. That was a really neat idea.
Yeah. It's always very difficult sometimes because we, as missionaries, Josh and I, believe it or not, coming up on 2 months, we'll hit the 20-year mark of knowing
Yeah.
each other at BIMI.
Yep.
And I think that kind of struck me as we tell lots of missionary stories and try to give, our perspectives and even sometimes advice, especially when we talk about things like deputation, to realize how much things have changed in 20 years. I thought, we're kind of giving, if you remember what it was like to ask missionaries 20 years ago about deputation. I mean, we're talking, slides and clickers and, so that's what it sounds like in many ways. I mean, when we started, Facebook was barely alive. There was no Twitter,
What?
Instagram.
Wait,
You didn't text pastors.
that I just realized when we started deputation, like from where we are now, it was
Yeah.
from where we started back 20 years. That was 1985 is the difference. Like
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah. Think
that,
about that.
did slides even exist back then? I mean, what on
Yeah. They,
earth?
they had
How,
VHSs, you know what I'm saying? Like
man.
I
So yeah,
know. So that's what it sounds like probably when we're talking. And so I realize that because I have children and they're
yeah,
teenagers. And so I thought, I'd really like to start talking to younger missionaries or potential missionaries. Now, there's
right.
always this idea. I really wanted to start it from ground zero. And when I met this young man a year ago, and you can go back and see the podcast, it tells you all about how we met and there's some funny stories in there. He was a podcast listener, which is funny. But I wanted to see a young man that I felt like, and we never know, life can change things, but I thought
Sure.
it'd be interesting to follow his journey. There was a movie years ago. I don't think I even saw the movie, but I like the concept. They filmed the movie like within like 10 years
Okay.
and showing this young man growing up. Now, I don't recommend the movie. I haven't even seen it, but I thought the concept was really neat
Right.
that they
Right.
they took the time to actually show you a person growing up. And I think that would be really neat to go through Rusty's life. A lot of the neat stuff Rusty and I talked about wasn't even recorded. So you'll find
Hmm.
about that in the future. I think that's going to come out. Good things, positive things, things that are happening in his life. But I was really struck with his life of someone who trusted the Lord to direct his steps at a young age. I listen to Pastor Chappell's messages a lot, and he was talking about recently being in some meeting with a bunch of pastors, I mean, good churches. And he was asking them, like, how many people in your youth group in this next year, how many seniors do you have they're going to go to Bible college to be, preachers or missionaries? And like they didn't have any, or it was like one,
Hmm.
And I think that really struck me last year when I heard that we really need to be out there as the missionaries, encouraging young people because we love being missionaries. We know the great blessing there is, and I think God's still calling just as many missionaries. I don't know that it's fear, and I don't know if it's always disobedience, but I think there's just maybe not enough encouragement to people to say, God's gonna give you an amazing life if He's called you to be a missionary. You're gonna love it, and it's gonna be one of those things you're really glad you did. And I saw all that in Rusty
Yeah.
last year. We had conversations about what he wanted to do. Like he didn't have a girlfriend, he didn't, but he didn't have a job. But he's like, I really have a heart for Australia, and he had a really great pastor, Pastor Kevin Folger, who was behind him to help
Yeah.
him get to those points. And he had some ideas in mind, and I said, hey, go towards that's great, man. Go towards those, and just to see how in that year God even directed his steps. You'll see that in the first two episodes, and how he's really getting close to being able to head off there. And though he won't be a missionary right away, kind of be an internship program. I
Okay.
surely
Yep.
appreciate that. When I did my summer internship here, that's what melted firmed my heart here for the Dominican Republic, and so I see a lot of similarities there. And so, but I was just really struck with this maturity he had as a
Yeah.
young man and willing just to go do what the Lord has called him to do.
Hey, that being said, you mentioned internship. I want to mention BIMI, our mission agency that we are both belong to for 20 years now almost. They
Whew.
have launched a new it's kind of a mentorship internship program where if you are interested in working with a missionary at an internship slash mentorship level, then you can apply. If you go on bimi.org, you'll find a section under the ministries listed entitled SMART, the SMART program.
Hmm.
Now, they used to do what's called SMART trips, which was
Mm-hmm.
mission trips
Yeah.
connected with Camp Bimmy.
Mm-hmm.
But this is
Mm-hmm.
I forget what it is if it's an acronym or not. But anyway, the SMART program has been kind of revitalized, and what it is now is you can apply. Either if you're a missionary, you can apply to be a mentor and receive those who want to come for an internship, or you can go
That's great.
apply if you want to go and spend an extended time on the field. I didn't really look at the parameters of. I did sign up to be a mentor because there's somebody interested in coming here through that program, and so I filled out the application, everything. This was
That's
actually
great.
something that our field director, we had presented years back. Bimmy wasn't there yet, but I'm excited to see,
Yeah.
this program developing because really preparation is so essential, so important. And I think about Josh's story and how much
Yeah.
preparation went
Yeah.
into years of preparation, even going to the field for an extended period, that I think was key to him facing this experience without yes, he's got, trauma. Yes, there's trauma, PTSD, and all that. But I think if this would have happened to somebody who's just got to the field with no experience, no expectations, you're just starry-eyed, and all you have is the romantic view of missions,
Hmm.
and then something like this happens, that will break a person, and it has, and it does break missionaries, and they'll leave the field
Hmm.
because of it. And so I think programs like this are necessary. I'm glad to see it developing. Now, Eric, I know I've spoken with mission leaders in the past, and part of why some mission agencies have avoided any sort of like extended internship program is to avoid making the mission dependent upon short-term missionaries,
Hmm. Hmm.
short-term. And that's understandable because
Yep.
the mission's primary function, there's two. There's the aspect of helping missionaries get to the field, and helping them when they're on the field, and providing legitimacy and paperwork and all of that. But there's also an aspect where they do handle the finances of the missionaries. So if the majority of the finances are coming from short-term missionaries, then there's a certain quota you have to meet every year. You have to just to maintain status quo. I think you have to increase your budget every year by like 5%. I don't quote me exactly
Hmm.
on that, but there's in finances, in order for an organization to stay afloat, you have to have this increase just to meet the status quo of
Hmm.
what's necessary to keep the organization fiscally running. And all that to say, if you're dependent on short-term missions, then you're going to go out there and keep recruiting short-term missionaries. And so
Yeah.
that's understandable, but I think they're vamping this program to where the mission doesn't become dependent on short-term missions. The goal has been and always will be long-term church planting missionaries. But I think the long-term part of the church planting missionary is preparation. How much preparation goes into you going to the field is going to determine, I think, a lot of times the longevity of you being on the mission field. And so I'm excited
Yeah.
about this
I
program.
think I
Yeah,
think internships long, especially long, more than 1, 2, 3 months, internships are so vital because there's truth to, like, you don't want to the dog, what is it, the tail wagging the dog there as
right.
far as short-term missions. But almost everyone I know who has stayed significant amount of times on the mission field had an ample, trip,
Right.
multiple trips or internships, and it really is a wise investment. Then someone who maybe goes on deputation for 3 years, goes to language school, and then after a year and a half on the mission fields back home, like that's
Mhm.
also another that is very more prevalent. And so I'm all
Yeah.
for that. That's great, and I'm glad to hear that. And so anyway, glad to hear that Rusty's going to do something very similar to that. And I just thought, man, that's there's this message I'm working on to for young people, and I heard an older preacher start with this creative idea, and I've kind of developed it, and it's a really neat story. The parallels between Paul and Jonah, both of them, ironically, wanted to go to Spain, okay, for totally different reasons. Paul says that he's at the end of his life and he's still pushing forward for the gospel. He wants to go to Spain. He's going to go to Rome as a stopover, but his goal is to go to Spain, go to the
Right.
uttermost part of the earth. And Jonah, instead of going towards God, is going as far away from God. So what's the furthest way you can go to Tarshish? Is the furthest way you can go to Spain. And interesting enough, both of them are going for totally different reasons to Spain, and neither of them got to Spain. And I thought that was an amazing
Mm.
comparison. These two people had
Right.
the totally different motivations with God, and yet God still didn't give them like their dream. He had amazing things for them, and yet when we look at these two servants of God, we think of Paul. We have a totally different mindset when we think of Jonah, and I think with a young man like Rusty, I don't know if he'll ever get to Australia. I believe he will, but like to have that heart, that motivation of
Right.
Paul to go to Spain, and what God does along the way is amazing. Opposed to there's so many young guys I think today that are often like Jonah, they're like, get me as far away from, what God wants me to do, and they're heading towards Spain too.
Exactly. Well, very good. Well, Eric, we are heading into a semi-busy fall season here. It's still hot here. It's averaging
Whew.
110 degrees every day,
Oh,
and it's just it's been miserable. But we found there's a tennis court here. We went down and we took some chalk, and the owner allowed us to draw lines to play pickleball. We got into
Oh,
pickleball over the summer when we were
I've
back in the
heard.
States, and so we brought rackets back with us, not expecting to, be able to play. But I was thinking about building a court on our property outside of town as an excuse to do ministry, and outreach with
Nice.
people. But we found this old tennis court, and we've been enjoying that. But we're heading to Gambia this week, and we're excited about this trip. And there's a church plant that we are in the process of helping launch and oversee the development and evangelism. I'll be going to do quite a bit of evangelism, some Q&A with different Muslims in the community. This is a community where we're starting a church that is probably half and half Muslim, half Catholic. And so
Mm,
just pray for that. Those who are listening will be the next month working and engaging that community. And just think, I'll put this in perspective. In the Gambia, there's a population 2 million people. It's the smallest country in Africa.
mm,
And the estimate right now is that 200 are former Muslims who are now Christian. So that's
mm,
it. That's the extent of
mm.
those who were former
Wow.
Muslim and became Christian, about 200 people in the country. And now there are many people that are open that we can have
Mhm,
discussions with. When I was there last time, I went right into a Quranic school and shared the gospel in Wolof, distributed some information and tracts. The imam actually called the students over and said, everybody needs to take this and read it. It was all in Arabic, of course, so they were able to read and study that. And so they're
wow.
very open,
Amazing.
but not they're open to discussion, but not as responsive as maybe some of the Catholics who are coming to Christ or the animists who are coming to Christ. And so we're developing programs and Bible studies and training people to do these Bible studies to reach Muslims where they are and to
Mm,
um, cultivate these Bible studies. You may not get a Muslim to come to church, but you can sit
mm,
down and have some tea with them in a room somewhere. And then we're providing resources for those we're training to do these Bible studies. Right now, we're averaging around 2 million people per month are viewing our online gospel films in 5 different languages. And so one of the languages is a predominant language in Gambia. So we're going to be recording some more gospel films and publishing that. So pray for as well the believers that are stepping out and doing these ministries of teaching, because when their face is out there in public, it can be dangerous for them, because just the nature of leaving your religion to follow Christ, that it can be dangerous for people. And so be praying for those different ministries. We're excited about doing that, and then continuing, of course, the ministry here in Senegal as well.
amen. Well, that's amazing. But for me, we're going to take a family journey out west in America, and I'm hoping at the tail end, and maybe even along the way, probably will be audio only, but I'm gonna bring my little recorder and I'm gonna try to get as many interviews. I have the chance to
Awesome.
maybe run into some very veteran missionaries and learn
Yeah,
from them,
very
and
good.
maybe even some other people you've heard of as well. We'll see how it goes, and praying for God's blessing and traveling mercies on that. So, well,
Awesome.
Josh, it's been a great audio visual adventure along the way, always, and love our podcast. We get a lot of great responses from people from all walks of life, missionaries, and it's been a joy to do it with you. I look forward to hearing your accounts and pray that you're for your safety and your family. And same with us. And look forward to being on the flip side, catching up with you.
Well, amen. We're excited to just see how the Lord is going to continue to use the podcast here, the themes. I think somebody wrote in and they wanted us to discuss the topic of the missionary and the sending church. And so
Mm,
it's not with me here, but I have Pastor Chappell, Paul Chappell, and was it Dwight Tomlinson? I think they wrote a book together, or maybe
mm-hmm.
it was. Anyways, it's
Sending
on
forth the
us.
laborers, maybe.
Yep. So I'm going through that again, and we're gonna maybe
Yep.
sit down and try to address that topic next time. But if you have any topic you'd like us to address, please email us at missionaryperspectivepodcast@gmail.com, where you can comment on whatever video you're watching. Leave a comment. Be sure to like it, share it, and all of that helps. Leave a review. We really appreciate it. And if this has been a blessing to you, let us know. And so we can continue to produce this content. We don't charge anything, Eric. This is just something we are able to do in our spare time. That's why we're not consistent all the time, but we're going to try. We're trying, Eric. And so
doing our best.
I'm excited to hear some of the interviews that Eric is going to do. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this will continue to develop and be used. Well, this is Josh speaking from Senegal, West Africa.
And Eric in the DR.
God bless. Have a great week.